when you'd written the songs that would become your new album, Choking on Halo, did you demo them with just guitar, bass and drums?
Yes, we recorded them all in Melbourne, and we don't really concentrate on getting complicated with the demos. It's guitar, bass and drums, get the melody, get the chords, get the words, and a few production ideas, but yeah, just really basic and take it from there.
So the next step, I imagine, was to find the right producer. So what led you to Los Angeles to work with David Holman?
I had a hunch, I suppose. I went to America to broaden my horizons and you know, I'd recorded in Australia with a lot of people and I thought, let's try America. I didn't find David Holman until the second trip there, or it's almost more like he found me through events. Friends of friends of friends landed me in his studio when I least expected it, and that was amazing.
So how did David initially react to your demos?
When I met him, I actually only had one new song as a demo, so I played him that and he got it straight away, which was excellent. And then I played him a couple of older songs, and the first one I played him it started off with quite a low vocal, and he actually thought it was a guy. He turned around and said, "Who's singing that?" And I said, "Me." And he went, "Wow." So really early on he pegged my, should I say, unique vocal style, and that really interested him because he doesn't want to make records that sound like anything else, and so we kind of bonded on that little moment.
So what a relief for you that obviously you were both on the same page right from the start.
We were, and in a lot of ways, that first meeting, I actually wasn't in selling myself mode, and I had no elevator pitch. I'd really just gone there to meet him from a surprise meeting the day before. Somebody said, "I'm going to introduce you to this guy." So I turned up without an elevator pitch. And when I met him, he said, "Tell me about yourself." And I said, "Read my bio." And he said, "I hate bios." And I said, "Read mine then." And he goes, "No, I hate bios." So I actually grabbed the big Hollywood producer's chair, he was on wheels, pushed him across the studio to his computer, dialed up my website, and at the time the first line of my bio was, "I hate bios, hard to write, even harder to read." And we were friends from that moment. And so yeah, we were on the same page, for many other reasons too. But
is it a coincidence that the opening song, This High, was also the first song written for the album and the first song recorded with Dave?
Actually, I don't know. It's not a coincidence, and it feels like one of those things that the universe ordained. It wasn't until I'd written that song that I was ready to meet a producer like David, and so I wrote that song a few months before I went back to America on my second trip. I was there for different reasons that time, but in my very first week there was when we met, and that's the reason that we started working together, was that song. So until that song existed, it's almost like the universe was waiting for me to write that song, and then they were like, whoever the universe is, were like, "Finally, we can introduce you to that producer," and they did, which was amazing.
The song This High references independence and self-belief, themes you often return to in your songs. Can you recall the birth of that song?
Yes, yes I can. That song, I dreamt on my last night in New York, my first trip. I went to New York and I woke up in the middle of the night. I had this crazy dream that had an amazing soundtrack, and I just lay there in my bed going, "Wow, that was a great soundtrack." And then I went, "Oh my God, that's an original song," and grabbed my phone and sang it into it. And the words and everything came later, which is the theme of the independence and self-belief came later, but the song was a gift. And I actually realized the next day when I was leaving that I was sleeping, and I'd been sleeping for a week, about 50 meters from the Brill building without realizing. So I feel like a ghost gave me that song.
Now, arrangements vary on the album from song to song. Sunshine begins with a recitation before the chorus kicks in. Did David encourage you to vary the album so much?
The song structures, if that's what you're talking about, you mean? That, yeah, sometimes we start on a chorus, sometimes we start on a verse. They're really intuitive. When we write our songs, we just start with a true idea, something that's honest and whatever, and we let it roll from there. So they are really unusual, and I was actually really surprised that David kept most of our strange arrangements. He actually kept those, or they're not arrangements, the sequence of the songs. He actually kept them and stayed true to them because he has amazing emotional radar, and he could see the sense that it made. And occasionally we'd actually find ourselves recording a song and trying to label which bit's the chorus, and sometimes we don't even know because we just follow this intuition and this emotion and let it lead where it goes. And Sunshine, an example that starts with is that a chorus? Maybe it is. I think it starts with a chorus, or a pre-chorus probably. My cat jumped on my chest when I was watching television one night, and he smells like sunshine. That he just does. I bury my nose in his fur and he smells like sunshine. So he jumped on my chest and I said, "You smell like sunshine, even at night time." And then I pushed him off and ran down to my dictaphone because I knew that was the start of the song.
Did you always have an outer space atmospheric treatment in mind for Diamond?
No, that actually came from the lyrics. So that was one of those in-studio developments, and the lyrics had been referencing a lot of outer space. I think it starts with E equals MC2 to the power of me and you. We levitate, we float in space on a big ball of green and blue with a permanent sunny view of the galaxy. So the demo didn't sound like that at all, but so that was all created in studio. It sounds like planets crashing together to me, which I love. It just sounds like God playing pool or billiards or whatever. And that song really was one that developed in the studio. We were sort of structuring it towards the end and adding extra choruses, and I went, wait, I'm going to add a school kid chant in here. I'm a big Pink Floyd fan, so I was like, instead of all these choruses, let's put a school kid chant in here. And David Holman, my producer, actually got this little look on his face and went, "Do you realise I have the equalisers from the desk that Pink Floyd's The Wall was mixed on? He happened to be there when it was being dismantled, and they would have ended up on a trash heap somewhere." And he went, "No, give me those." So he had them. He found some school kids, some underprivileged school kids from East LA that were in a music program because they don't get music education in school. And we brought in about 6 or 7 little beautiful little children, and they sang for us, did that little chant for us, and we put it through the equalisers that we used to mix Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Just about every song offers something different in the sound, and on My Flag on the Moon there's a classical piano introduction. Where'd you pull that from?
We were messing around when we were writing the song in Melbourne. I co-write with my good friend John, and we were just playing around, and he goes, "Well, hang on, how about some Bach?" And he starts playing this intro, but it was like a childlike version of it because the tempos change and it was meandering and just really, nice and emotional and a little bit fractured and beautiful. And so we put that on the demo, and that was another one of the things from the demos that David Holman just went, "Wow, we need to keep that." I mean, we replayed it, but he kept the spirit of that.
The album's title track, Choking on Halos, features double-track vocal harmonies. You must have been really pleased with David Holman's ability to sonically treat that song, in fact all the songs, without losing your vocals in the final mix.
It was one of the first things that he connected to, was that I have this voice that doesn't sound like anyone else's, so it was always his intention to make sure that never gets swamped by anything. And he also approaches his work. He's got a vast technical knowledge, but he approaches it from an emotional point of view. So he needs to make sure that the emotions in the voices are always heard, and he always makes sure that happens. And he actually has the skill to make sure that still happens, even if there's an avalanche of things around it. In Choking on Halos, there is a counter line, 2 vocal lines somewhere in the middle, and different lyrics, different words, everything, and you can clearly hear all of them while everything else is still happening, and that is a real testimony to his skill.
You mentioned this before. When listening to the album from start to finish, it's obvious how much care was taken in the sequencing of the songs. The tempos even flowed throughout. A good example is the last 2 songs. First, talk us through the ballad Silence.
Silence. Oh, have we got a box of tissues? Silence. Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. The sequence of the songs was really intentional. The album is. I was determined to make an album, and it's a movie, and every song is a scene, and I want it to be listened to as a whole album in sequence. And Silence was written about my beautiful puppy dog Sabrina, who passed away at the age of 13. And what she left behind was silence, and so it's a really emotional song for me. And David Holman he has a beautiful dog that reminds me a little bit of Sabrina, so he knew what the song was about. It's about anyone leaving, whether they break up or die or whatever, but he was very attached to the emotion of the song too. So when we were recording those vocals, honestly, my little music stand had no lyrics or anything on it. It was all tissues, nose drops and Vicks. I cried all day. And so did David Holman. He couldn't even see his screen. He was just bashing the space bar to stop recording at the end of a take. He couldn't even see it. So it's very emotional. And then that's followed up by Slingshot, which is really riding off into the sunset.
Well, it's interesting because in contrast musically to Silence, the final track is the up-tempo Slingshot, which seems to sum up the optimism of the entire album, that despite being self-funded, doesn't offer any compromise in production or care taken in getting the best out of every song.
That's absolutely right. There was no compromise, and the whole album was built on optimism. My optimism, I was working 2 time zones for 3 years to make it happen, and David Holman's optimism. And Slingshot, for example, we'd actually nearly finished recording that song, and I was basically having a final listen to it, and I asked David Holman, could he rearrange the whole intro so that it sounded like it was being played on a car stereo, because that song's a driving song, and it's for driving up the coast on a sunny day and throwing yourself at the horizon. And I said, can he change the intro and make it so it sounds like it's coming on a car stereo up behind me and then jumping into my car when it reaches me? And he looked at me and went, okay. I got to spend a whole year in the studio with a world-class producer all up. It happened over 2 years, but if you smush that time together, it was a year, and it was amazing. I felt like Pink Floyd. I'm very lucky.